Well, everybody here probably knows the man in the corner and has dealt with him one way or the other. Roderick Gemayel, for better or worse, you know, in lots of ways. Rod has been the curator here at Allendale for 16 years. It seems to me like it's gone very quickly. He's a North Carolinian native, born in a little town called Spencer near Gastonia, near Charlotte. He is a rabid NC State fan, and you don't tangle with him about that. So but to know how well he treats his son-in-law, who graduated from the University of North Carolina, shows his people skills, because they get along really well. And those people skills helped Rod his whole life long. They helped him woo and win his sweet wife, Linda. Also, they got him a job at Eastman, and I think he was there for 26 years in several capacities, and the last of them was part of marketing team, and he's a great marketer. When he retired, the city was lucky enough to snap him up and put him in place here. He is truly a man, a jack of all trades, really a master of many, okay? He does everything from go out and putting lights on trees, trimming bushes. He's up on the roof. I mean, he deals with brides and their mothers, which is this, and he does it successfully. That's a sign of a very successful man, I think. And he's going to take us touring, but before he does that, he's going to tell us about the history of Allendale, and I, for one, didn't understand actually how old Allendale is. It didn't begin with the Brooks home. It began way before that. So I'm sure you'll find a lot of interesting things out. Okay? Thank you, Rod.
Wow, I didn't know all that. I may put a disclaimer on this. Linda Gemayel is not responsible for anything I might say. And if any of y'all know me, I just kind of go through stuff and we can talk. And if you all have any questions, please give me one of those. I might say I'll get to that in a little bit, but we can talk about things. A lot of times things come up that you're not sure about and you might want to ask a question, but I'll just give you a little history about Allendale and basically Harvey Brooks and Ruth Brooks, who lived here. And Harvey moved here in 1930. How many of y'all, usually you guys have been here. Who's lived here the shortest in Kingsport? Shortest. Everybody, how long? Well, yeah, Dorothy. But a lot of people, and I have people I take on tours in here, that doesn't count. You were close enough before. When I take people through here on tours and stuff, brides and people, a lot of them are not from Kingsport, or a lot of them have just moved to Kingsport in several years. And I'll always ask them, how old do you think Allendale is? And they'll say, 1850, maybe 1900. Allendale will fool you because it's not that old. Everybody, most of you, I'm sure all of y'all know, it was brand new. Harvey and Ruth moved in here in 1953. And so it's not as old as you think. It was built with old world quality, craftsmanship. The walls are real thick, but there's a lot of stuff here that people just don't know about. Even people in Kingsport, you'd be amazed that don't know a lot of history about Allendale. But be that as it may, Harvey Brooks moved here in 1913. Harvey's brother, Charles, was already living here and working here. He had a lumber, I'll call company. They were sawing down trees and doing rough cut lumber. A lot of the old barns in this neighborhood, this area, probably were built out of their lumber. Harvey went into business with Charlie, and they were quite successful in what they were doing. World War I broke out, and Harvey thought it was his duty to join, and he volunteered. He went in the Army, and when he came back, he and Charlie continued their business, but at some point between getting out of the Army in 1920, Charlie wanted to open up a I guess we'll call it a hardware store. Citizen Supply. Any of y'all know where that was? It hadn't been closed that long. I think it closed, 6 or 7 years ago, and at that time it was the oldest business in Sullivan County, continuously run business by a family. But that was when it closed. But Harvey did not want to go into the lumber business anymore. He wanted to kind of branch out on his own. He didn't want anything to do with the hardware business. So he decided he'd open up a sand and gravel company, which eventually evolved into a cement company. How many of you all know where the Vulcan Materials is up behind Walmart up here? That was Harvey's quarry. He sold that to Vulcan Materials. They actually were partners for a while before he finally just went completely out of it. But that's how it got here. Harvey was married to a Ruth Hare. Ruth was from Jonesboro, Tennessee, and she was a school teacher here in Kingsport. And she was a very proper lady. She, as we go through our tours later, I'll show you her shoe closet upstairs. That's what all the ladies would like to have, is a shoe closet. And people that knew her said she did not come down those steps that she wasn't dressed to the nines and ready to go. Some of the workers I've talked to that used to work here said, she'd come up through the pastures sometimes if she wanted something done in her high heel shoes, but she was dressed properly. Ruth died in 1963, and gosh, let me look here, because I'm going to have to jog myself on this. In 1963, and he remarried in 1968 Josephine Pratt. Any of y'all know her? Josephine, they were longtime friends. I mean, they had known each other. The Pratts and the Brooks, they'd known each other for over 40 years, and they married. And she lived here until Harvey passed away in 1969 from a stroke. And I'm kind of getting out. And important. I'm kind of going to go through several different things. Harvey had moved here. The reason he had the farm here, he had a farm in East Kingsport, upstream from Fort Patrick Henry Dam. And when they were building the dam, it was going underwater. So you have to have a place to move. So he looked around. He found Allendale here. This was owned by J. Fred Johnson. Any of y'all ever heard of him? Everybody's got a founding father. And I think J. Fred's probably one of those guys that gets a lot of credit for getting Kingsport where it is. But he purchased this farm from J. Fred and moved his stock here. It was, I'm kind of a little out of sync here, but when he had moved his farm here, he built the home. Mrs. Brooks met with Alan Dryden Sr., who was the architect on the home, and she told him all she wanted was a little white farmhouse with a white picket fence. And then she wanted this and that. And he thought, well, that's what she wants. So he started talking to her. She said, no, I don't want 9-foot ceilings. I want 12-foot ceilings upstairs and down. And I want this and that. I want a lot of fireplaces. And he knew in talking to her that she was really talking about an antebellum Georgian-style home. And that's what he ended up building. He didn't ask her about it. He just designed it, and she saw it and loved it. The home is... it's built like it was built in the 1800s. In today's world, walls have 2x4s in the walls. They're about that thick. These walls are like this. We've got 12-foot ceilings upstairs and down. We've got 12-foot ceilings in the attic. And there's actually a 4-foot crawl space between the first and second floors. I have crawled between all these floors up here. And it's kind of neat, though, because if you need to do some wiring or something, you can certainly get to it. That's the neat thing about it. But the home is kind of interested in that fact. Anybody know where the name Allendale came from? Well, I know Josie's a reader, and it was the Tennessee Walker.
Oh, I thought it was
No, Mrs. Brooks had a favorite championship Tennessee walker. His name was Ron Allen, F38. I don't have a number on my name. But he was Ron Allen, F38. She took the name Allen and then incorporated the name Dale, which is an English term for a quiet place in between the mountains. And that's where the name Allendale came from. Now you know the rest of the story. The home was designed by Allen Dryden Sr. The grounds and stuff that you see here, and I've got to find that on here, were designed by President Eisenhower's landscape architect. And his name was Chimishiko, and I cannot pronounce it correct. It's a Japanese landscaper. But he did the design work out here. And then another gentleman by the name of Mr. Wansom, who landscaped portions of the White House, did some work out here. So, there are a lot of people coming in. Harvey believed in going after the best stuff he could go after, and he certainly did not spare any expense. He moved here. They've had 2 ponds on the facility. The 2 ponds you see up here were man-made ponds. They were not natural to the area, but he wanted something out here for fire protection, so that's why he built those farms. Any questions? Yes?
Can you tell the story about the front portico?
Yeah. Oh, great. Thank you. I plant people out here to answer my questions. No. Harvey was one of these guys, and I never met him. I'm sure several of y'all have probably met him. But from what people have told me, he absolutely was the salt of the earth and would do anything for anybody, no questions asked. He did not like having his picture made. I can verify that because I find very few pictures of him. And the ones that I do, he's standing there like that. A very quiet person, I would assume, but Harvey's one of these guys who had an I won't say enormous, but a lot of money. At my house, Linda Gemayel says, that yard really needs mowed. Have you thought about doing it this year? And I get out there and mow it. I come home from work, and if we're not eating out, there might be dinner there because she cooked it. We kind of cooperate on the other stuff around there. But Harvey lived here. When he lived here, he had 2 full-time housekeepers, a full-time cook, a driver, a butler, and a caretaker that lived in that little house next door. Now, his farm of raising his Black Angus cattle and Tennessee walkers, that was not his business. That was his hobby. I play golf. Not very well, but I played golf. I'll need to buy a new golf club. And Linda says, well, do you really need another club? Well, I've never bought many, and they're not that expensive. Harvey's hobby was raising Black Angus cattle and Tennessee walkers. That's why he had a 500-acre farm. That's why he had a paper-carrying veterinarian by the name of George Wheeler who lived down in the old veterinary's office. It was down. Whose office was that? Who? Chevelle's office down here. He lived there. He was the farm foreman. And like I said, he was a paper-carrying veterinarian, worked for nobody but Harvey Brooks. I could not afford it. I take my dog, if I had one. Linda takes her puppy to the vet, don't you? You don't have a vet that works just for you.
No.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Lily is deprived. But that's how Harvey lived here. I mean, he lived a good life, but he also had enough money that if he wanted something done, George Wheeler would not go into Harvey's office and say, Mr. Brooks, do you really know how much that's going to cost? Harvey's mentality was, it doesn't really matter. You figure out how to do it, I'll write the check. And that's kind of how he did. Now, Kathy was asking about some things here, and a good example of that, he purchased the front portico in the mansion in the 23-foot Cypress Columns from the old Adkins Mansion in Knoxville. It was down in the World's Fair area, and they were tearing it down. Harvey and Ruth had been there and liked it, and he purchased it and had it moved up here. Also, the grand staircase that you see out here came out of that home. That's no small undertaking because when they moved it up here in the 40s, mid-40s after World War II, 11W was the main north-south highway between Knoxville and Roanoke. That's also, by the way, since I'm there, that's also the reason Harvey had Allendale situated up here on the hill. Because his mentality and what he told folks, he says, I want people going from Knoxville to Roanoke to see Allendale as they come into Kingsport. And he said, I want my home to project a positive influence that this is a good place, a prosperous place to live. So that's why Allendale's kind of up on this little knoll way back off the highway. But anyhow, they were moving it up here. He had to get permission from the state of Tennessee, number one, to get it permission to do it. He had to have a highway patrol escort. It took them 3 days to move all that up here. It took them 3 flatbed trailer trucks to move it up here. And between here and Knoxville, there were several railroad underpasses and other bridges. Guess what? This stuff wouldn't go under. So if you got a lot of money, you find a farmer that owns the adjoining land. You pay him to tear his fence down. He brings his tractors out, pulls the tractor trailer up and over, and then you pay to have his fence rebuilt. No big deal. George Wheeler, you figured out, I'll pay for it. So that's how, and that's what Kathy was asking about. But that's the way it was. I have people in here every year that will ask me or relate something where they used to live out here. I had a lady several years ago said that when she was growing up at an adjoining farm, her dad was real sick one year and couldn't get the hay in. Well, Harvey sent his entire staff over, and they spent 2 days getting the hay in. Tractors, trucks, staff, everybody. No questions asked. I had another lady one time said that she used to live back in the back here, way back in there. And she said it was nothing in the winter when there was snow on the ground for Mr. Brooks to send his driver driving across the pastures in his Lincoln Continental to bring the kids that were sleigh riding hot chocolate. They had no children. They entertained here a lot. They had Easter egg hunts. They had Christmas parties. This was a great place from what I understand to come trick-or-treating because you got neat stuff here. Not like you get at the Gemayel's house. This was kind of on the hit list, a place to go. But that's kind of about Harvey. That's a good question. Other questions?
Where did Harvey and Charlie come from?
They moved here from Rogersville.
Oh, okay.
And since you brought that up, when I first came to work here, I'm back in the office, and Dora that worked for me at the time came back. She said, there's a man out front that's got a car. He says he thinks it belonged to Harvey Brooks. And I said, well, okay. And I said, I went out and looked, and there's this guy out there. And I mean, he has got overalls on. He's got mud on his boots. I mean, he looks like he's been working out in the back 40 for several days. They got a big flatbed trailer truck, got this huge Lincoln Continental on it. And he said, I bought this from a lady in Rogersville. And he said, she said somebody's told her that they thought it came from a rich man in Kingsport. And he said, I saw this house, I thought I'd stop. So we went out and looked. We went out and looked at it, and it was very much a car like Harvey would have owned. I asked him, I said, have you looked in the glove compartment? Because people are famous about leaving stuff in there. Well, we looked in it, and there, sure enough, believe it, there was a title, and it said, gift from father to daughter, and I don't remember her name, but her maiden name in it was Brooks. And so it had to be, my guess is when Harvey passed away, the car was given to someone who still lived in Rogersville, who in turn gave it to their daughter. But it was kind of interesting looking at that. Now, I didn't know anything about the cars. The gentleman that had it knew a lot, because it turns out, I kind of asked him, I said, how'd you get interested in it? Where'd you find this? He said, on eBay. And he was from Pennsylvania. And he lived off of Lincoln Highway, and then you turn on to Lincoln Road to get to his place. He was an heir of the Hershey family. He owned over 300 Lincoln Continentals. And this had nothing to do with Harvey, but kind of when you talk to me, you get the side stories. I like to tell stories. But This guy had one of Harvey's cars, which I would have loved to have purchased. He paid $2,000 for it. I know the Daniel Boone Antique Automobile Club here would have loved to take that as a project to restore it for us, but it's up there. I haven't called him. I'm going to one day call him just to say, have y'all done anything with it? Because he may have just let it sit there, and he might say, well, I'll let you have it back. Other questions? I did not.
And your office, how old is
Well, the property here, what we call the Brown House back here in the back, and I don't know why we call it Brown House, because they're not the ones that built the original building. The original building was built by Mr. Netherland for one of his children who was getting married. And they lived back there for a number of years. I'm not exactly sure how long. They sold it to the Brown family. After the Brown family lived there, it went through several other ownership, but somehow it's called the Brown House today. The Netherlands raised 8 children back there. The Brown family raised 12. They added on to it though. So they had a larger home when they lived there. You know, we all need our own personal space. And, I got my place to go to, and Linda goes her place. Everybody got 10 bathrooms in the house and closets. Can you imagine 12 back in that home back there? I mean, that would be, those quite tight quarters. Harvey, I'm going to give y'all something else. Are y'all a history group, aren't you? And this has not a lot to do with Allendale, but I found a letter one time that was written to Harvey. And it's interesting how times have changed. These things right here, did I mess that up? These things right here have eliminated these things right here. The urgency of knowing everything that's going on as soon as it happens is changed. Now here's a letter Harvey got, and he got this from a guy by the name of Porch, P-O-A-R-C-H, who evidently worked for Harvey. Harvey at some point, and this was written, and there's no date on it, but at one point Harvey spent some time in Cuba because his health was not doing well, and during late December and January he went to Cuba for a spell to get to some warm weather, and then he came back by way of Orlando, and he spent time at the San Juan Hotel in Orlando. This has nothing to do with anything other. I think it's just interesting how people used to do. We don't do it anymore. It says, this is Porch writing Mr. Brooks a letter. Now the letter, who knows how long it would take to get to him, so it's kind of like after the fact, because we're not used to that nowadays. He said, thought I would drop you a line and was just wondering how you were doing. Fine, I hope. Business has been good until about January 1st when the rainy weather quietened things down quite a bit. It is raining here this morning, makes me feel kind of blue. Everybody use blue in their letters anymore? Wishing I was there with you. Understand you did not like it much in Cuba. Don't blame you, as it is a place that no place for a man to go and rest, or at least that's my impressions. I bought screen doors last week from Bill Baswell, as he seemed to have a very good price. Don't know whether I bought right or not, as could not find last year's invoice, but I think it will work out anyway. Gay G.C. Underwood have G.C. Underwood working around with Derek in the storeroom. He is quite green. So you can imagine it keeps us pretty busy cleaning up around him. But I like it. I'm also showing up around 7 a.m. sharp in the morning. Won't make sure he knows I'm at work on time. You might be in Cuba and Orlando, but I'm still working. I bet you're a good fisherman. Can you catch some for me? Mr. Brooks, and this is Charlie Brooks, Harvey's brother, said to tell you he received your wire. They telegram people back then. Telephones have absolutely eliminated stuff like that. and he would send it tonight. Also, he just talked with Haynes, and he and Mr. Vaughn are leaving at 6 o'clock Saturday morning for Orlando, but did not quite think they would reach there Monday. They're leaving Saturday. They don't think they're going to get to Monday. We can leave here and get to Orlando in one day, can't we? But of course, we don't have to contend with the rain. That's what he says. He says, but did not quite think they would reach there Monday, as roads would be bad on account of so much rain. I just found this interesting. That is, for what it's worth, y'all get. We talked about the Brown House. We talked about Harvey's history. We talked about the grounds. You all probably know a lot more about Allendale than a lot of people around here do, because there's a lot of people that every year come up. They'll come in here and they'll say, I've never been to Allendale. Can I come in and look around? Can you tell me something? And they say, I did not know. I had a guy here probably 3 or 4 years ago, knocked on my screen door back there, and he was headed to work. And he says, I've driven by here 50 years going to work. Could I come in and look around? Of course, we let him come in, we talked to him, showed him everything. But it's a neat place to work. I enjoy working here. It's a lot of fun. We deal with a lot of people. We deal with brides and grooms and parents and in-laws. And that's the interesting part of it, because in today's world, as a result of these cell phones and computers, instead of just walking in, I'm old enough, y'all aren't, I'm old enough that when Linda and I got married, we decided, I was getting transferred to Richmond, Virginia, and I said, I'm going to Richmond, what are we going to do? She said, well, let's get married. And about a week later, we were getting married in a church at 10 a.m. on Good Friday, got in the car and drove to Williamsburg, Virginia. And about an hour later, wasn't that big a deal. In today's world, the girls walk in with a notebook. They've been on Pinterest. Y'all know what Pinterest is? It is the scourge of my job. When they walk in with that book packed, I'm like, oh, Lord. And then, of course, they look at buying the dress, 4 weddings, all these wedding things on TV. And they come up with these great ideas. And, of course, we kind of bring them back to earth, because they really do not realize that's not the real world. But we have a good time here. Dora Martin worked here with me for years. A lot of y'all, I think, knew Dora. She's retired on me. And I've got Jennifer Henry working for me. And with Jennifer and Dora and I were kind of the same age. I'm this age, and Jennifer is about half the age, at least, of everybody in here. There is a generation gap. Jennifer talks about cool and gotcha. Sure. Now, don't get me wrong. She is extremely bright, and she will do absolutely anything. A great person to work with, and I've adjusted. I like having her back there. And I mean, when I need something on Facebook and Bonnie, what are all these Instagram and all that stuff? I say, Jennifer, come in here. But she does a real good job. If any of you all need anything, and I'm not here, you certainly can talk to her, because she will tell you everything I would tell you. One last pitch. Where's Leanne?
She's protecting her.
Oh, good. I'll talk about her. Friends of Allendale, I'm going to back up and add one. Can I add one more thing? When the city took over, we didn't talk about the city getting possession. When Mr. Brooks passed away in 1969, he willed Allandale Mansion, the ponds, and 25 surrounding acres to the city of Kingsport. Well, what does a municipality do with something like this? I mean, you can't put offices in there. The rooms aren't big enough. There's nothing out here. What do? And the city took forever to decide if it would receive it. They had a year to decide, and they went absolutely down to the 11th hour of the 11th month BMA meeting, and they were getting ready to dismiss. They had not made a decision. Bill Garwood, who many of you know, would not dismiss the meeting. He stood up at that time, and made one of these impassioned speeches that, guys, we are going to miss the boat if we let Allendale revert back to Mr. Brooks's heirs. And they stayed over real late that night, pushing 12 o'clock, which is something our BMA really does not like doing, if y'all know that. And I need a drink of water. But they stayed over and they voted to take it. That's the good news. The bad news was, well, they had it kind of like the dog that bites the tire. What do you do with it? And that's kind of what this was. It sat here for another 12 years. It was not lived in. It wasn't used for an office. It wasn't cleaned. It wasn't heated and cooled on a regular basis. And you know what your homes would get like if that happens. I mean, it will go down quick. You could never open the doors and it would go down. 12 years later, Bill Garwood, no longer on the BMA, started, I think, feeling some ownership to this place. There. And started coming out and doing some volunteer work. He called the city and he said, we'd like to go out there. I got some friends. And Bill started coming out with some friends of his. He knew some folks that he worked with that could write a small check if he needed something done. And they started little by little cleaning the house. The first thing they had to do, they had to refinish every floor in this house. They ripped out everything and just had to do it because they were just a mess. Then kind of later on when he formally formed a group that is now known as Friends of Allendale, they started coming out and starting in one room and going to the next and next and the next until finally they got the downstairs completed. And even then, nobody knew what was going to happen to Allendale. We're not a Biltmore. We're not a tourist destination. But they put an ad in the paper, and they said, okay, in September, we're going to open Allendale, and if you've got any ideas, call us, and we'll discuss it. And we basically today do mostly rentals. Not that we don't want to do tours and things like that, but that's kind of our niche. We do a whole lot of weddings, probably easy half of what we do are wedding related. We do anniversaries, birthday parties. This time of year we have graduation parties. This time of year we've got prom pictures going on when they come up in the middle of wedding. We don't like them doing that. We put ads in our, Jennifer put an ad on our webpage this morning, not an ad, but a note saying, please respect our renters. Please don't come in with your prom dress. I mean, it was a lot nicer than that because she's nicer than I am. But she immediately got a note back from a girl saying, can I come out Saturday and take pictures? It's like, they don't read the whole thing. But Bill got his group together. They started doing stuff out here. They opened up the downstairs. And anybody know who had the first wedding here? No. Good. Because what I tell you, y'all might believe. Mary Stedman, who I think a lot of y'all know, I've been told had the first wedding in the mansion. But we've had a lot here. And we've got 3 facilities. We've got the mansion. We've got 2 barns up here that we rent. We got separate parkings for each of them. We've had 3 weddings going on at exactly the same time. And they don't interfere with each other. And it's not by design, it's just the luck of the draw way Allendale's laid out, the way we've worked things out. Questions. Anybody got a stupid question? Those are the best ones.
I would like you to mention, just if anyone is interested who hasn't been or isn't a friend of Allendale, that we're always looking for new friends.
We are. Actually, that's how I got this job. I was out here, they were doing some work. I was retired from Eastman, and that proved to drive Linda Gemayel nuts in less than 2 months. And so I started looking again. I thought that was probably a bad decision. But I was out here doing some volunteer work. Louise Ammons called me, and she said, we're going to be up at the picnic pavilion cleaning out the ditch. So I went up there and worked, and we talked. She asked me how I liked retirement. I said, it's driving me nuts. And she said, well, Teresa Foster is taking another job, and I think they're going to be interviewing. You'd be good at that. And I thought, well, I'll think about it. Well, Louise kept on me, and I eventually did apply for the job, and they had, I think, 80-some applicants for it, and I was extremely fortunate to get it. Now, I had no training in what I'm doing other than I'm halfway good with people and talking, and so I do those things well. But that's how I got the job, is actually through Friends of Allendale. Well, I was just out here doing some volunteer work, and there are a ton of people in Friends. Linda Snook's going to be our incoming president next year. Jenny has been our president. Were you our president or our treasurer?
Oh, I did a lot of secretary treasurer.
Secretary treasurer. And Dee Dee, how many have been involved in Friends of Allendale? Dorothy, raise your hand, because Fred counts with you. Fred is a bundle of energy. If I need anything, I got two, and nothing against Linda or Dee Dee or anybody else, but I got two people, Alan Dryden and Fred Wallet. If I need anything done, I call them, and basically they are here, and Charlie Brooks. Good folks. All the friends that serve on the board are just an immense help to us. Friends of Allendale basically make sure that we keep Allendale the way Allendale should be. We're not going to come in here and paint these rooms chartreuse or something like that. We're going to keep it the way it should be. Gosh, when I first came to work, I met with the Historical Commission. Is that what they're called here in town? Society? What are they? Okay. I met with them. I forget who the gentleman was, but he was wanting to meet with me. And I thought, oh, Lord, now he's going to get on me. I hadn't done anything. I hadn't been here long enough. But he came out, and Alan Dryden came out, and several others. And we sat here and met with him, and we left. And I think they do an absolute wonderful job, but we really didn't want to be part of them just because if any of them worked with them. And there's nothing against them. But when you're part of that, it's a step by step by step by step. You can't just, if I wanted to paint the outside of Allandale Mansion white, I could not go buy paint and paint it white until I got permission, even though that's the color of it. You've got to get all these approvals. He met with us. We met for a long time, and he got lazy. Look, he says, I would advise you not be part of us because you all are doing exactly what needs to be done. You're maintaining the historical importance of Allendale and keeping it the way it should be. You're maintaining it, and we have no trouble at whatsoever. And he says, quite frankly, there's a lot of red tape you will avoid not being part of us. So I appreciated him being honest, and we have moved on, and we're still doing stuff. Now, things here are not exactly like they were when the Brookses lived here. The parlor, you can look through that door, is green. I guarantee you, and I do not know, but when they lived here, I bet you the walls were either probably a lighter beige, a light green, maybe a light blue, but there was not a lot of colors back then. People just kind of went to basics. And we kind of update our decorating committee, Friends Decorating Committee, keep our colors current. And we look at it like we think Mrs. Brooks, being the proper lady she was, she would keep changing with the times to make her house look special.
And what about the furnishings, Rod?
And you know, see, that's where you get good questions. The mansion, and you know, people often will give a nice home to a municipality or something, but what happens? The heirs come in and strip it of all the neat stuff. Mr. Brooks left everything to Allendale, to the city. Probably 95% of what's in this home, the antiques, the artwork, the Persian carpets, are original to the home. The china, the silverware, everything, original to the home. And that's the neat thing about it. And we use it. We do not put ropes up and say, don't go in there, don't sit in that chair, don't dance on that floor, don't spill wine and cake in here. We use it. And people, believe it or not, people are extremely respectful when they come here. A lot of times I'll have people here who are going to have children. And they say, well, we're not bringing the kids. I'm like, bring the kids. We've had worse on these floors than what your kids can do. So,
Did the family object at all to everything being left to the city?
no, they got, believe me, they got plans. Yeah. Harvey had a 525 acre farm. He gave, at some point, I'm not sure when, in memory of his wife, he gave 300 acres to the University Center back here in the back. We've got 25 acres. His heirs have, between here and the University Center, they've got down to the, whatever that road is down there, and then up to the University Boulevard, I think it is up here. They had all that. And they have piece by piece sold it. They sold the last piece of property up here 3 or 4 years ago, I think. They had a big sale and an auction, and actually did it up at the picnic pavilion up here. But no, they didn't. Charlie Brooks, many of y'all know Charlie. Charlie is also on our board. He's one of those we don't let go off the board because we think we needed Brooks on the board. And Charlie's another one. I mean, if I need something done, I call him and he comes out here. He does the croquet at Allendale we do during Fun Fest. He cleans all our stuff, gets it ready and everything. If I need any help, if I need manual help, I can call Charlie. He is on the ball.
And what is his relationship exactly?
Charlie's father,
A nephew.
he's a nephew. He's a nephew of Harvey Brooks. And was he the son of Charlie?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's one of them.
Oldest of 5.
So he's
But he spent a lot of time
He's
here.
Harvey's nephew.
Yep.
Yes, Charlie's son.
Right.
Other questions?
Does the city make any money from this?
We try to maintain break-even mentality. It's Allendale is part of the parks
I see.
department here, and we kind of the way the city does on things. You see, I might be speaking. Don't put this on camera. No, I'm joking. We really look at this as Allendale is one of the parks. It's kind of like a quality of life type thing for living in Kingsport. Harvey left it to the city for one reason. He wanted everybody to be able to use Allendale and to enjoy it. He did not want us to keep our prices way up here so that just the muckety-mucks about town could use it. He wanted everybody to be able to afford Allendale and be able to use it for a special time in their life. And we've had a lot of people here. And quite frankly, people that don't have a lot of money that probably could not, I know they couldn't afford something like this if it was in Knoxville. Because this house is not, let me tell you, am I going too long? In Knoxville, I'm going to finish this. In Knoxville, if you rented something like this, my guess is that most of the day, if you want to have a wedding down on the river, it's going to probably cost you $3,000 to $5,000. You'll have to use their caterer. You'll have to use their rental stuff, everything. And here we don't do that. Here, our most expensive is a wedding on a Saturday, which is $750. And that includes 100 white folding chairs. So, but we try to make it so everybody can enjoy it. And there's Leanne. I was going to say something ugly about you. Well, I couldn't think of anything ugly to say, so I didn't. Now, you know I like to talk, and I'm getting an evil eye from Linda, so
Let you know we had things.
if you all got other questions, I'm certainly going to be here. We'll kind of go around, if y'all want to go around the house and look at things, you got questions, different things. There are a lot of pictures and stuff we've got out of the old Allendale, so enjoy yourself and have some cake. Eat those flowers back there. They're real flowers. They look like real flowers. That's all I've got.
I wanted to say, for those of you who don't know, this is a special day in Leanne's life. This would be her mother's 81st birthday today. And her mother was, we're using her china, her mother's china, and silver, and and the apron, what, on the table, her mother did an arrangement in Allendale, and so this is a very special time, and so we're glad it worked out, that we got to move it to today. And I think it's all very fortuitous.
I made a trip to South Carolina so we could combine things, because we shared the same pattern. So I asked Daddy if he would mind if I borrowed some of her things.
Oh, that's nice.
And so she might not get them back. Or she's smiling